Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you a very pretty cool mating attack played by one of the best players in the world, Abdusattorov from Uzbekistan, playing with the white pieces against my compatriot Thomas Beerdsen, also a grandmaster. But here we get to see the difference between a super grandmaster and just a strong grandmaster. With the white pieces, Abdusattorov opens the game with the move e4, and we get to see a very sharp Sicilian game. After c5, knight f3, e6, d4, pawn takes, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6. We have the 4 knights Sicilian, and it's a very cool opening, but it can lead to very sharp play. And Abdusattorov goes for a modest move, bishop e2, but it's really tricky, as we will get to see. But it's up to black what black really wants to do. If black wants to play a sort of Scheveningen type of structure with pawns on d6 and e6, that is absolutely possible. But most players who go for this setup, they want to develop their dark squared bishop first. So the principled and main continuation is to get a bishop out to b4, pinning the knight on c3. Knight cannot move, but look what white is going to do now. Already on move 7, white is going to castle kingside and saying that black, you can take that knight on c3, I'm going to take your bishop, and after you take the pawn, you're a pawn up, but I'm going to show my fantastic compensation for it. And that's what was happening in the game. Here, white decided to take on c6, trading off the knights, and black is for a choice. How do you take back? Either with the b pawn or the d pawn. If you take back with the b pawn, there is the move queen d4 with an attack on the pawn and the knight on e4, and that's a little bit problematic for black, as at the same time there are also ideas bringing the bishop out to a3. This is a typical strategy in a lot of Sicilian openings with the pawn on e6 and black trading off its dark squared bishop. After that, white has the possibility to take advantage of these weakened dark squares. So instead of taking with the b pawn, Beerdsen recaptured away from the center with its d pawn, and now white of course can go for the exchange of queens by taking on the 8, but having sacrificed the pawn, you would rather keep the queens on the board, so you have better practical chances for a kingside attack. So instead of taking on the 8, there follows the move bishop d3, attacking the knight, and that basically sacrifices a second pawn. Black can take on c3, which was not played in the game, and I think it's because that after this move, queen h5, black has a big problem in the long run. What it's gonna do with that king? It cannot castle because of checkmate on h7. Look at this bishop and queen. White has a huge lead in development with ideas of either playing bishop b2, sometimes the bishop can even go to a3 to prevent the black king from castling. So this is really tricky for black. Instead, Beerdsen played here the move knight c5, as he's planning to trade off the knight for the bishop. It's a good strategy. Once you have won material, you want to trade off the most dangerous pieces of your opponent. But there followed the move queen g4, attacking the pawn on g7. And here black got to think what it's going to play. If you castle kingside, maybe bishop a3 is a possibility with a very unpleasant pin to deal with. If the knight moves, the rook on f8 is hanging. This is still theory, actually, but instead of playing this move, Beerdsen played here the move queen f6. He's protecting the pawn on g7 in a different way. And now after bishop g5, white develops with gain of time, attacking the queen. The queen captures on c3, so black takes a second pawn, and this is getting really sharp. And now I think the move played by Abdusattorov is practically very strong, as he played here, instead of a logical developing move like rook ad1, which is perfectly playable as well, he decided to go for the move queen g3. And this is a very tricky move, and I like it a lot because the queen is trying to gain control over the dark square. So there are possibly ideas of entering with the queen on d6 or c7 with potential mating threats thanks to this bishop on g5. Another main idea behind this move is that it sets up a battery with the bishop on d3, which means that castling kingside just runs into bishop takes h7 with check, and thanks to this discovered check, you're winning the queen. In the game there followed the move knight takes d3, very understandable. And you would think, okay, white can take back with a queen. Well, he doesn't want to exchange queens. You don't want to take back with a pawn. No way. Abdusattorov goes for rook 81. So it's a temporal piece sacrifice. And it's temporal because the knight cannot be saved. If it goes away, there will follow rook d8 with checkmate thanks to this bishop on g5. It's very dangerous for black. And white is just intending to take with a rook on d3, renewing this mating threat on d8, attacking the queen as well. So the queen anticipates that capture, goes back to c5, rook takes d3, threatening rook d8 with mate. And now black still cannot castle. This is a big problem because they will follow bishop h6 and the g-pawn is pinned, cannot move. Well, it can go to g6, but then the rook on f8 can be taken. This is game over. Instead, black played here the move f6 because you got to prevent rook d8. So you're interfering on this diagonal. The bishop no longer covers the d8 square. But look, it's a tempo game. We are fighting for the initiative, and rather than just moving the bishop away, we go for rook fd1, played by Abdusattorov, with the point that if you take the bishop, it's rook d8 check. After the king goes away, you take on h8, so you're an exchange up. This is looking really bad. So in the game that followed, castling kingside, it looks as if the king is safe now. But now the bishop can move away with tempo. And with tempo, I mean you're threatening checkmate and the g-pawn cannot move. If you go to g6, it's again bishop takes f8, winning the exchange. So the queen has to come back to e7 to protect the mating threat on g7. But now another brilliant tempo move, aggressive move by Abdusattorov is the move rook d8. And that's very important idea because this rook cannot be taken. If you take on d8, it's rook takes d8 with check. If you take with the queen, now the queen no longer defends the mating threat. It's queen takes g7 with checkmate. It also not capturing the second rook, but let's say play king f7, runs into queen takes g7 and it's game over. But what is this rook exactly doing? Well, there are some serious problems here for black, especially with the king, with the back rank. The bishop cannot go to d7 because it will just be captured by a rook. So you got to find an alternative plan. And well, what you would like to do is play the move e5 at some point. But I'm going to show you what happens if you play e5. It was not played in the game, so we make a small step away from the game. But it's very important because Abdusattorov's idea here is to take on g7. It's a sacrifice. If you take with the queen and it's rook takes f8, you cannot take with the queen because of the pin. So you got to take with the king. Now it's rook d8 check. The king got to keep the queen defended. So it's king f7 and now queen b3 check. This is very important and that's why white is waiting for black to move its pawn to e5. If you ever go bishop e6 to block the check with your bishop, counter-attacking the queen and the rook, then there is queen takes b7 with check and the rook on a8 is hanging. So that is not possible. If the king goes to g6, it's rook g8 and white picks up the queen thanks to a skewer. If the king instead would go to e7, the trick is rook takes c8, queen takes b7 check, and also the rook is hanging. So if the king goes back, it's queen takes c8, and white has a better queen endgame, which he's going to win because the pawn on c6 can be taken next. So we see that black is in big trouble here, and it's not easy to find the best move here at all. Apparently, the move b5 is actually quite a good idea, but it's absolutely not obvious why. But it's basically because we want to play e5 at the right moment, and later, and compared with the other line we have seen, white no longer has this idea of queen b3 and queen takes b7 later on. That's why b5 is such an important move. But let's now go to the game as Beerdsen instead played the move c5. Looks also logical, but now white makes a very useful move. With the move h4, there are never any back rank issues, and this h-pawn is going to play a crucial role later on as well. And look, this rook can never be taken. We have seen already that the bishop is stuck on c8. So black tried here to move b5. Now white continues with advancing its pawn to h5, and still the bishop cannot go away. If it goes to b7, the d7 square is no longer guarded by the bishop, and it's rook to d7 attacking the queen, and on the next move white is going to capture on g7. That is game over. So in the game, there followed the move e5 played by Beerdsen, and now white is gonna play in a very similar way as we have seen already. Bishop takes g7, opening up the king side. Queen takes g7, there's not much else you can do. Rook takes f8, black has to take with the king, and now the rook enters on d8 with check. King got to keep the queen defended, king f7, and now it's queen b3 check. So black may have thought here that there is this move, c4, to block the check and say that you're a piece up, but white can play queen takes b5, and this king is absolutely not safe. It doesn't have sufficient protectors, no pieces, no pawns, and white has many ideas, and the strongest threat of course is to play queen e8 with checkmate, but even if black defends against it, there are probably checks or ways to regain the material anyway. This is really looking bad for black. So black instead played the move king e7, attacking the rook on d8, but there follows a beautiful move, queen d5. You're a piece down, but you're attacking the rook. But okay, it's not so easy to capture the rook because the rook on d8 is hanging as well. One idea, if black tries to move the rook away, rook b8, it's queen d6 check. And after the king goes away, you can, well, you can play many moves, but you can even play this check, and the queen is going to be lost because of that pawn on h5. The king cannot go to g6. So that's a beautiful idea. Let's have a look. In the game, black played the move queen h6. And you may consider taking on a8, but then, okay, the rook is still hanging. So first queen to d6 check, king f7, only move. And now you have to be very careful, because if your idea is to win back the piece on c8 with queen c7 check, king e6, rook takes bishop, then black comes in with the queen to c1, check. And after king h2, queen f4, there is this repetition mechanism which cannot be sidestepped by white. So that's leading to a draw. But you should not be interested in trying to regain the material. You're playing for the initiative with two of your best pieces. And that, against an exposed king, that should be enough. Just make sure that black doesn't get a chance to play queen c1. And therefore, Abdusattorov played f4. Fantastic idea. If you take with the queen, it's rook f8 check. Queen protects the rook. If the king goes to g7, only move. Queen e7 check. King h6, rook takes f6, and the queen is gone. White is winning the queen in that case. Instead of taking the pawn with the queen, Beerdsen decided to take with the pawn on f4. But now, once again, it's queen c7, king e6, only square for the king available. Queen c6 check. And you're attacking both the king and the rook in the corner. King to f5. And the rook can absolutely be taken, but once again, don't go for the material. First look at your main priorities, and that's giving checks against the king, and it's leading to checkmate by force. Queen d5, the king can only go to g4, now rook g8. Okay, it's actually not leading to mate by force. Black can block here the check with the queen, but then you take the queen, and then later you take the rook, so that's absolutely hopeless for black. Black played the king to h4, but look, this king is caught at the side of the board, and the move g3 is played, another tempo move, and this is also leading to checkmate. If you take the pawn, it's queen e4 check. The king cannot go anywhere. If bishop blocks, it's queen takes g4. Actually, only square is h3, but now you can even bring the queen back to the corner. That's a nice move. Queen h1 checkmate. It's a ladder mate on the g and h file with queen and rook. In the game, Beerdsen was very friendly to his opponent, giving him the chance to execute checkmate on the board. Instead of capturing the pawn, black went for king to h3, but now after queen g2, or even queen h1, it's checkmate. So I thought this was an absolutely brilliant game by Abdusattorov. Great opening preparation, but mainly the spirit of his play, sacrificing two pawns for a huge initiative, with major pieces, opposite color bishops, and a lot of pressure against the king. And one of the main lessons, one of the main takeaways is that you should not look for trying to regain the material as early as possible, but rather try to extend your initiative against the opponent's king. And that was very nicely performed by Abdusattorov in this game. Do you like this video? Please subscribe to the channel and I will cover many more interesting attacking games. See you soon again. Bye bye.